Some very strange things are happening in the world around us. Let's take a look at 6 stories that have gone viral recently and comment on them from a Christian perspective. You're not going to want to miss the last one. At number 6, we have an NBA player who went viral because of an incredible response he gave to a reporter who asked a pretty silly question. This is a great story because there is so much negative news out there today that it is very refreshing to see something encouraging like this.
Do you view this season as a failure?
Oh my God. Okay, because I'm not that up. You asked me the same question last year, Eric. Okay, do you get a promotion every year on your job? No, right? So every year you work is a failure. Yes or no? No. Every year you work towards something, towards a goal. Michael Jordan played 15 years, won 6 championships. The other 9 years was a failure? That's what you're telling me. You know, there's good days, bad days. Some days you are able to be successful, some days you're not. Some days it's your turn, some days it's not your turn. And that's what sports is about. You don't always win.
You don't always win. In a world and culture where so many people feel entitled to have everything they want without actually working for it, it is encouraging to see such a high-profile athlete recognize that life doesn't always give you what you want, and it's perfectly fine to accept when life does not go the way you want it to.
Because the moment you start believing that this thing happened to you because God wasn't in control or because God wasn't present, the moment you start believing that that God missed it. You just said you can't trust God to be in control of a broken heart. You can't trust God to be in control of a marriage. You can't trust God to be in control of a pandemic. If you can't trust God to be in control of a pandemic, how do you trust him to get you from here to heaven? He's either sovereign or he's not. And if he's not sovereign, your salvation is not secure. If he is sovereign, then that means at that worst moment, he wasn't absent.
At number 5, the enormous video game publisher Activision experienced severe backlash when it removed popular streamer NICKMERCS' skin from the game Call of Duty simply because he tweeted something that a powerful person did not like.
In Glendale, California, brawls break out between parents and LGBT activists outside a school board meeting. In response, NICKMERCS of FaZe Clan simply stated they should leave the little children alone. That's the real issue. That Activision Blizzard gets activists triggered as Nick has his own custom character in the Call of Duty video game. Then the official Call of Duty account states, due to recent events, they removed NICKMERCS' bundle from their store because they're focused on celebrating Pride.
Nick responded to the controversy with a pretty amazing statement. Listen to this.
My wife and I just had a baby. Brand new father. But her and I agree that we want to be the ones to talk to our kid about things like that. I just don't think it's any place for a teacher or a school. I don't think it's the place to speak about things like that. I didn't mean to upset anybody. I know that I did. I'm not apologizing about the tweaks. I don't feel like it's wrong.
Good for Nick for standing firm upon his convictions. Afterwards, there was a second popular streamer, TheTatMan, who, in support of NICKMERCS, told Call of Duty to remove his custom skin from the game too, which Call of Duty did.
Well, TheTatMan today came out and he made it right. This is the redemption arc for TheTatMan. Now, he has a bundle, a creator bundle, just like Nick did, and they were released at the same time. His remained in the store, whereas Nick's was removed for saying children need to be protected. So TheTatMan came out and said this right here. NICKMERCS has been my friend for years. We went in getting our COD operators together. It feels wrong for me to have mine and him no longer have his. In support of my friend, please remove the TheTatMan bundle at Call of Duty. Freaking wrecked them.
The result of all of this is that there is now an enormous boycott and backlash against Activision and Call of Duty, similar to the boycotts against Bud Light and Target. It's encouraging to see all kinds of people, not just Christians, stand up against companies that are trying to pressure and bully them into accepting ideologies that they do not agree with.
Children are under a relentless assault by all the forces of evil. And they are defenseless. And we have a society and a culture that wants to make sure that these who are pumping out this destruction are free to keep doing it without restraint.
At number 4, we have popular celebrity Jamie Foxx going to the hospital because of face paralysis and a blood clot, and what a source close to the situation revealed.
Well, Jamie Foxx was admitted to the hospital because of a medical complication. That's all the public was told on Thursday, April 11th, and we were never given any specific details on his current health status. And then I would say about a week later, a journalist by the name of AJ Benza claimed that he spoke to a source that was extremely close to Foxx. And here is what he heard about the situation. Take a listen.
I had somebody in the room who let me know that Jamie had a blood clot in his brain after he got the shot. He did not want the shot, but the movie he was on, he was pressured to get it. What I found out from the man in the room was that the blood clot in the brain caused him at that point to be partially paralyzed and blind.
So I will make an assessment based on what is not being said. His family has spoken to the media. This obviously went viral. Everybody is reporting on this on the left and the right, and the family has declined to comment thus far. I would say, just using common sense, that if this was my family and a person went out and told a viral lie that I suffered a blood clot in my brain because of the COVID-19 vaccine, we would immediately issue a statement. We would condemn the journalist, and my family would call them a liar and say that it's just none of your business. But they seem remarkably hush-hush about this, and they are choosing to say nothing. So their silence seems as though they are suggesting that there is some veracity to this claim.
What makes the situation with Jamie Foxx more interesting is that recently there are 2 other celebrities, Justin and Hailey Bieber, who experienced very similar symptoms, which is extremely rare for people that young to experience, which suggests that there might be something going on that people are afraid to say.
Remarkably, a bunch of young, healthy people in Hollywood started experiencing things like face paralysis and brain clots. So before we get to Jamie Foxx, let me remind you, Justin Bieber, whose face just magically went paralyzed. And he was on tour, which would signal to me that he definitively got the COVID-19 shot. But again, that is sheer speculation. We can also just assume that a healthy young kid in his 20s just randomly gets a paralyzed face. Take a listen.
This syndrome called Ramsay Hunt syndrome, and it is from this virus that attacks the nerve in my ear and my facial nerves and has caused my face to have paralysis. As you can see, this eye is not blinking.
Well, lightning struck twice in the Bieber household because his wife was then also impacted with a droopy face and a blood clot in her brain. Take a listen.
When I went to respond, I couldn't speak. The right side of my face started drooping. I couldn't get a sentence out. Everything was coming out like, not even jumbled, just like couldn't get any of the words out. So obviously immediately I thought I was having a stroke, like a full-blown stroke. He thought I was having a stroke, so right away he asked for somebody to please call 911 and get a doctor.
Are we normalizing that? Are we normalizing people that are in their 20s thinking that they're having strokes, having face paralysis? Is that normal now? Are we doing that as well as young kids having heart attacks? Are we just going to pretend that we didn't do anything medically throughout COVID that could be contributing to that?
The pandemic was a time when science and risks were completely ignored in order to push an agenda that was both utterly authoritarian and dangerous. And interestingly, those who pushed this agenda have now come out to admit that they were wrong to do what they did. But for countless people, the damage has already been done.
We must obey God rather than men. Does this mean we have no responsibility to our leaders? Not at all. We were told millions were going to die. It was just sensible and rational to be protective. As time went on, however, we found out the virus was not as deadly as predicted, and the commands not to assemble didn't apply to protesters and riots.
At number 3, we have a story on a related note about Novak Djokovic, who is currently the greatest tennis player of all time, yet has been the subject of enormous controversy because of his refusal to do one particular thing. Take a look at what Djokovic said in this amazing interview.
Have you received any vaccination against COVID?
I have not.
Why?
I understand the consequences of my decision. And one of the consequences of my decision was not going to Australia, and I was prepared not to go. And I understand that not being vaccinated today, I'm unable to travel to most of the tournaments at the moment.
And that's a price you're willing to pay?
That is the price that I'm willing to pay.
Ultimately, are you prepared to forego the chance to be the greatest player that ever picked up a racket, statistically, because you feel so strongly about this jab?
Yes. I do.
But as things stand, if this means that you miss the French Open, is that a price you'd be willing to pay?
Yes, that is the price that I'm willing to pay.
And if it means that you miss Wimbledon this year, again, that's a price you're willing to pay?
Yes.
Why, Novak? Why? Why did...
It's both unbelievable to see the interviewer be so shocked as to why Djokovic would not want to inject something very unpredictable into his own body, as well as encouraging to see someone as high-profile as Djokovic stand firm upon his convictions against enormous pressure to compromise. Djokovic is willing to give up his title as the greatest tennis player of all time to do what he believes is right. Likewise, Christians should be willing to give up things the world cherishes for the sake of Jesus Christ and the gospel.
I invite you to a life of just real sacrifice and a life of joy unspeakable and full of glory. Some of you young men, you need to think about this. You need to think about going out there and preaching the gospel, suffering for Christ and relishing that suffering. Now, I'm 49 years old and my body is broken into a million pieces. Like Robert Murray McShane said, the Lord gave me a message and a horse, and I've killed the horse. And I feel that way, but I can tell you this, I'm glad. I'm glad. He's worth dying for, young men.
At number 2, the Whatever podcast has exploded in popularity. But listen to what the New York Post says about it.
Well, New York Post decided to publish an article saying that the Whatever podcast is disturbing and is sexist towards women, and it's utterly ridiculous they are being called out, and that is what this article also fails to acknowledge. And it is a very famous podcast at this point. They know what they're walking into. You cannot honestly say that Brian Atlas is bamboozling these women and these guests by setting them up when they know what they are agreeing to. And to flip this a bit, if you think that these women do not know what they're agreeing to and have no idea what this podcast is, then I think that you are the person that is actually calling these women dumb.
It seems obvious that if anyone says dumb things on the Whatever podcast, it's simply the fault of the people saying the dumb things. Brian simply gives many different people the opportunity to share their views on a variety of topics. And perhaps due to the kind of people who want to go on a show like this, sometimes dumb things are said. I was astonished by what this woman said about the book of Genesis.
Yeah, you know what God said? It said he made them man and women. He made them man and women.
He actually said man, women, and them.
I'll pass on that. Thanks, though.
So...
No, he said God created man, male and female created he them.
So them. So there's them. They thems.
No, the them refers to the men and the women.
No, but he said them,
the
so it's
word.
like they them.
He's referring to both of them.
But he said them, so he's like saying man created men and women in them. So he
no. He said in the beginning God created man, both male and female created he them.
To think that the them in male and female he created them refers to non-binary people would be hilarious if it wasn't so sad. Now listen to Keeko provide her expertise about biblical languages and translation.
And in Leviticus, it says, for a male to have sexual relations with another man, as he would with a woman, that is an abomination in God's eyes and is worthy of being put to death.
How many times has the Bible been translated? Do you guys know that that scripture was changed so many times, though?
You're making falsehoods, but go on.
I feel like you should let her finish.
Thank you. So the Bible has been translated. Obviously, that's not a falsehood. It was not written in English, was it? No. Do you know Latin?
It wasn't written in Latin.
Okay, whatever was written in
Aramaic.
Oh yes. Okay, it was been.
Aramaic,
my whole point
Greek,
is.
and Hebrew.
Let me finish.
You're
Jesus
trying to educate
Christ.
me on the Bible,
okay,
but
let
you
me
don't
finish.
even
Do
have
it
the
after.
most basic facts.
Do it after.
You
Let
don't
me
have the
finish.
most basic
Let
facts
me
straight.
finish.
Go on.
You keep interrupting me. So, what I was saying is, the Bible has been rewritten so many times.
False.
It's been translated so many times.
Faithfully and accurately.
Can you tell
Okay,
him to
let
stop
her
interrupting me?
finish. Like,
he's
she
interrupting
let
every
you.
word I say, dude.
Okay, just continue.
Like
Go
everything
ahead.
I talk, he's interrupting me every word. If I do that, you would get on my case.
You both interrupt. It's a conversation. Just go ahead. Go ahead, Keeko.
The Bible has been translated multiple times, and there is proof and evidence stating that most of those translations from those scriptures, they were actually saying a man should not lay with a child. It was not man and man. A lot of things have been translated because there's so much P word that runs through the church that they do things. Oh, are we talking like that? It's not in the Vatican. There's not. We don't have these things.
Hebrew. I'm sorry, I can't
you-
listen to that false. I learned the Bible in the original language that it was written. I learned in Aramaic and I learned in Hebrew, and it's never a child. It's a man should not lay in bed with another man. And so Jews don't even share beds. Like on sleepaway trips, if we went on overnight, Jews, 2 guys, are not allowed to even share a bed for a sleepover because it's that serious that it also even more so means that you should not do anything gay.
Again, what Keeko said there about the Bible would be very funny. But the reality is that it's extremely sad that an enormous number of people in the world are similarly ignorant. The Whatever podcast is interesting to me because while a lot of what people talk about are shallow and immoral, sometimes there are interesting discussions about the Bible, Christianity, and biblical morality. Finally, at number 1, we have the controversy surrounding Chick-fil-A.
I have some very sad news for you guys that you might have already seen on Twitter because it was trending for the majority of yesterday. But America's, and specifically conservatives' favorite chicken is under fire. The holy grail of Chick-fil-A that people thought was immune to wokeness has sadly been infected. But apparently, it was infected long ago. So it's interesting that it's just trending now and the people are just calling for boycotts now. Somebody tweeted and said, "Hey Chick-fil-A, heard y'all have a DEI program now. Tell me this isn't true. Surely y'all are smart enough to know the moral and cultural Trojan horse this is, right? Which is, I think, the most excellent way to describe DEI because it really is a Trojan horse. Because on the surface, it looks fine and it looks happy and, oh, we're just loving everybody. But you kind of see later on what it actually ushers in and the people that are leading it.
There are calls for people to boycott Chick-fil-A now, primarily because there is a growing awareness about Chick-fil-A bowing to woke culture. And one sign of this is the fact that it has a VP of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is an extremely biased initiative.
There's a holy trinity of social justice: diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's the holy trinity of social justice: diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity has to do with identifying these disparate groups, and they continue to multiply. I mean, it makes sense that these groups would multiply, especially when there are advantages to be gained by belonging to these particular groups.
Also, this cringy clip of the Chick-fil-A CEO has resurfaced and is being shared online more now.
If we need to find somebody that needs to have their shoe shine, we need to just go right on over and shine their shoes.
And some stock in Chick-fil-A.
Any expressions, a sense of shame, a sense of embarrassment.
The problem with this is that shining the shoes of black people is merely meant to debase white people before black people, rather than get to the heart of the problems in our culture. But for me, the most obviously problematic thing Chick-fil-A has done recently is that in May, right before Pride Month, Chick-fil-A posted this picture on its Instagram with the caption, "For all the times they came home wearing their favorite sauce, now you can send them off with all the sauces they'll want to wear." Smiley face. Find their faves at the link in our bio while supplies last. This rainbow image is a not at all subtle endorsement of Pride Month and LGBTQ, which for me demonstrates clear compromise. Whether or not you continue to eat at Chick-fil-A, it's probably important to recognize that it's not really the conservative Christian company that it started out as.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like these videos and want to help support this channel, the best way to do it is to just watch these videos until the end and click the subscribe button. Thank you so much for your support and encouragement.